One thing people don't talk about is the environmental impacts of this industry. I worked with a gentleman by the name of Murad Gabriel, I don't know if anybody's heard of him, or you can go to silentpoison.com and read about what's happening in Northern California. He was tracking an animal called a fisher. Anybody know what, I didn't know what it was. You know what a fisher is? Like a little weasel. They're really cute, but really vicious. Yeah, they're really nasty, apparently, mean. But he was tracking them, and they're all tagged, and they stopped moving. So this is about 10 years ago. So he, as an ecologist, went in to find out why these fishers die. They have really no natural predators in very remote areas in Northern California. And so they'd find a dead fisher, and they said, we got to test it. And they found out that on average, 1.6 pesticides per dead fisher. It's like, pesticides? Why there's all these pesticides in the middle of Northern California in the forest, right? And so when he was going in, he was stumbling across a lot of what he described as trespass grows. Illegal trespass grows in the national forest. They're everywhere. And this is the thing that a lot of people don't talk about. A lot of the people in Northern California are indigenous. They depend on water and growing crops and killing game for their sustenance. And the water diversion is outrageous. And I'll show you some pictures here that he sent me. They predict just to clean up California alone about $70 billion to clean up the environment, because the industry is leaving a trail of destruction. There's dead animals, there's trash, irrigation tubing. This is just a picture of one area in Northern California. All those little dots are illegal marijuana grows in the national forest near Mount Shasta. And if you go to, and I didn't believe this, I said, you can see them from Google Earth. I'm like, are you serious? Come on. So I actually went to Mount Shasta and I kind of scanned with my computer. It looks like measles up there. They're little pockmarks of illegal marijuana grows. So this is what they're stumbling on. There's bighorn sheep and beavers and rabbits. There are, let me go back here. So here's irrigation tubing, and some of they're poaching animals because they're bored. They're tending their plants, and depending on where you read or what you read, depending on your climate, it could be 6 gallons per plant per day. It could be 10 gallons per plant per day. Who knows? I'm not a grower. I don't know, but the people I talked to have said it's kind of all over the map depending on kind of where you live and the climate you're in. But let's take 10 gallons per plant per day, and you saw the illegal grow at the house in Denver that had several hundred plants. So you're looking at 6 times 10, or 600 times 10 is 6,000 per day, 6,000 gallons per day in that one grow. And they say there's about 50 to 80,000 grows across the state of California. And so the poachers get bored because they're watering their plants, and bear comes by and they shoot it, and they're finding that they're using carbofuran, which is a banned pesticide in that little pink bottle, which 1/8 of a teaspoon will kill a 300-pound bear. It's banned. And they found the bottle of carbofuran says peligro. It's coming from Mexico. It's this very potent pesticide. And they leave the trash there. They have irrigation tubing. They have insecticides and pesticides and rodenticides and fungicides. And they leave it there when they harvest, and they go. And now Dr. Gabriel, who's the ecologist with his little clipboard and brim glasses, he needs DEA and law enforcement escort. He wears Kevlar now to go to eradicate these trespass grows. And 30% of them, the DEA says, too dangerous. We won't go there. Booby traps, snare wires, armed guards, guard dogs said, don't go there. It's too dangerous. Anybody see Murder Mountain? Heard of it? It's a Netflix. I don't watch a lot of Netflix. Did you see it? Did you like it? It was interesting because it kind of explains this whole culture and the Humboldt County, the Green Triangle, back in the hippies. I mean, I totally understand why they wanted to do what they did and where they lived and just kind of be off grid and be happy and naked and smoking weed and fine, I don't care. But they're mad. They're actually mad at the industry because the industry and the cartels come in and are completely destroying what they started that whole hippie thing for back in the 70s and 60s. Dead bears. This is the San Isabel Forest, southern Colorado. One of the first responders that I know down in southern Colorado went for a hike, and this is the trail kind of going through there. And in the middle of the San Isabel Forest was this big, huge, not tended marijuana grow. And I was in Utah. Well, let me rewind a sec. Anybody hear of the Waldo Canyon fire in 2012, Colorado Springs? It was our largest urban wildfire. I was evacuated for a week. I didn't lose my home, thankfully. And this is 2012, predates legalization. When the burn When the fire was out, they found a 22-acre illegal grow in the burn scar, housing quarters, irrigation lines, and the Pike National Forest. And when I was in Utah and I invited the president of the chiefs of police from Utah, and this is right before they voted for medical marijuana, I said, I can tell you that it's happening in the Wasatch, in the National Forest. And the chief of police is like, yep, it is. And I can tell you it's probably happening here in the summertime. So we're going to talk just very briefly about money, because everyone's like, well, that'll fix our problems. You know, this is an industry, it's going to bring in a ton of money on tax, and it's going to solve our problems. And here's kind of the revenue stream over time in Colorado. Yeah, it is generating money every year, a little more. Here's kind of the total. It's been over 1.2 billion in sales over 6 years. It's a lot of money. And I'm going to pick on 2018, where it was 266 million. Just keep that number in mind. But if you look at the Colorado state budget, 0.9%, less than 1% of the state budget comes from the marijuana taxes. That's not a cash cow, in my mind. Right? And other states have fallen flat. I mean, California promised $1 billion in revenue when they went legal a couple years ago, and they got 8% of what they said. It's complicated in Colorado where the money goes. You know, where does the money go? I can tell you, talk to anybody in the school system, have you seen any marijuana money? Everybody says no. No, nothing for programs or education or prevention or mental health, teacher salaries, nothing. But it's very complicated where the money goes. And nobody's really able to say where the money truly goes, because if you look at the schools, they're not getting it. My insurance went up after all the fatalities and the collisions have gone up since legalization. You know, I think some of the state legislators in Colorado can't spell P&L. They don't know what L is when you're talking about profit and loss. There was an economist that wrote from a National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and economist wrote a paper. It's about $1.4 million cost per fatality. Talking about property damage, life insurance, indemnity, etc. 1.4 million per death. So if I fall asleep at the wheel and wrap myself around a telephone pole, about $1.4 million. In 2018, we had 144 marijuana-related driving fatalities. That's about a $200 million cost. All right, remember, they made 266 in revenue in 2018. And we can't put a price tag on adolescent use and addiction. There's a lot that go into it. A lot of intangibles. Law enforcement, again, predicting $70 billion to clean up California alone. And if you look at the BP oil spill in the Gulf, that was $60 billion, just as a reference. Healthcare utilization, you look at hospitalization rates related to marijuana in Colorado, continue to go up over time. There was a report that came out of Colorado for every dollar generated costs $4.50 to regulate. I'm not convinced of that number. I think it was a little inflated, but I do feel that it's not zero. I don't think it's a positive income stream. So I published a paper in my community. One hospital between 2009 and 2014 lost $20 million just from marijuana-related ER visits. You know, there were some intrinsic weaknesses because you have to use the urine, doesn't tell you acuity, those sorts of things. And plus it boils down to coding. You know, I had to stop at the top 5 codes, but the marijuana diagnosis could have been down in 10, and I couldn't count that. So I think we missed a lot of those positive urine tests. But if you just generally, hypothetically speaking, that's about another $83 million a year pre-legalization. Cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome, has anybody heard of that? Have you heard of scromiting? You know, Ronit Lev is an ER physician in California. She came up with the screaming and vomiting at the same time, scromiting, because it's almost pathognomonic. If you have somebody with cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome, she said she can walk in an ED and say that person has gastroenteritis, that person has cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome. It's the hot showers, you know, to kind of make them feel better and less nauseous. The scromiting, it's violent. People have died from scromiting or hyperemesis. There have been 4 case reports that I know of. You know, they get electrolyte imbalances. They have what's called pneumothorax, pneumomediastinum. They need chest surgery. So where are those costs all factored in? But the average cost based on my ER colleagues in Pueblo is about $6,500 per scrometer that comes in, because you have to do the workup. You need a KUB, you need labs, you need IV, you need tubing, you need medication. So it all adds up. So on average, about $6,500 per cannabinoid hyperemesis patient. And so if you're allowed only 1 patient per ER per day in Colorado. That is another $59 million healthcare costs. So now you're upside down, you're negative right there. My emergency colleague friends tell me they see about 2 to 3 marijuana-related diagnoses per doctor per shift in Colorado Springs, which is not, Pueblo is even worse. So these are kind of the things to consider to wrap it up. You know, I think you should have mandatory drug testing on all violent crimes. You know, it could be marijuana, because cannabinoid psychosis is a real thing. But, you know, we have other drugs. We've got methamphetamine, we have heroin, we have fentanyl. But if there's a violent crime in Colorado, they are not required to test. You know, everybody heard of the Planned Parenthood shooter from a couple years ago? That guy moved to Colorado for marijuana. He was on social media recruiting people to smoke with and have a good time. They didn't drug test him, right? He had very hyper religiosity. You should limit potency because the link between potency and psychosis is strong, and mental illness. Eliminate, home grows are breeding grounds for black market, period. You know, and the state is losing revenue if you're going to tax that. Support law enforcement with funding and provide funding to schools for drug prevention at the elementary level. I mean, my kids went to a very small school in Manitou, which is outside Colorado Springs, and now the people in the schools are seeing second, third, and fourth graders opening lunch boxes that reek of marijuana. They have a used, unclean marijuana container from Maggie's Farm, and it's full of candy. And they can't do anything. They're hamstrung. They cannot confiscate, even though they suspect that parents may be self-diagnosing and treating kids' ADHD with edibles. They can't prove it. They can't confiscate, but the kid's not doing well in school, etc. Have state data widely available. Get PSAs on contaminated products. You need to have those public service announcements if there's something like a mycobutanol or a different fungicide or pesticide that's on it. Monitor public health impact and environmental impacts across the state. Watch your adolescent use. Smoking is not a good health choice. We don't encourage people to smoke cigarettes. Why would we encourage people to smoke marijuana? Discourage use during pregnancy and lactation, driving fatalities. I support FDA drug development. Give me a product that's proven with different components of the plant that is proven for this medical condition. I am fine. I have no problems with that. But I don't think that, I mean, we have plant-based medications out there. Aspirin comes from the willow bark. We have chemotherapy agents that come from plants. But we have hemlock and strychnine and poison ivy. That doesn't mean they're good for us, right? So I think that we should support drug development with components of the plant that are helpful for certain medical conditions. I have no problems. And follow the science, not the money. The science really is what should direct policy, not money, because it hasn't been a money winner for a lot of the states that say it should be. And I poached this from Dr. Ratu. Marijuana is not the most dangerous substance on the planet. I would totally agree with that. The danger, in my opinion, is in that gap and the disparity between what is perceived as harm and what is real harm. Driving impairment, adolescent use and addiction, healthcare utilization, environmental impacts. So there's Garden of the Gods in Colorado Springs. It's a beautiful area to live. I'm very happy and fortunate to live where I do. So I'm going to open it to Q&A right now.